Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast.
It's great to be diving into another story.
Today, we're pulling back the velvet curtain on Victorian London. We're plunging into a scandal that, well, it whispered through palace corridors and really shook the foundations of polite society.
We are talking about the Cleveland Street affair of 1889.
Exactly. Forget dusty history books. Think of this more like a detective hunt through a hidden world.
Imagine a London just shrouded in secrets, reputations built in these really rigid appearances. One wrong step could lead to, well, utter ruin.
Right.
So our mission today is to unravel the threads of this pretty explosive story. We want to discover what clandestine activities were unearthed.
Who was involved?
Yes, the powerful figures caught in the spotlight and the surprising aftershocks that rippled right through Victorian England. We're sort of piecing together a puzzle here.
From fragmented accounts, official inquiries, whispers, we've got a fascinating collection of clues from the initial, almost insignificant police work, believe it or not, to the dramatic public exposures that followed later.
Yeah, prepare for some genuinely unexpected turns as we delve into this intriguing and, frankly, rather scandalous episode.
Okay, so where did this whole dramatic saga kick off? How did it start?
Well, the initial spark, quite ironically, came from something seemingly trivial, a theft.
A theft.
At the London Central Telegraph Office back in July 1889. A 15-year-old messenger boy, Charles Thomas Swinscow, was found with 14 shillings.
14 shillings. That sounds like quite a bit for a telegraph boy back then.
It was a lot, several weeks' wages, and telegraph boys weren't allowed to carry personal cash on duty, to avoid mix-ups with customer payments.
Ah, okay, so that immediately looks suspicious.
Extremely suspicious. So Constable Luke Hanks brought Swinscow in for questioning, thinking maybe he was involved in the theft.
And did Swinscow talk?
After some initial reluctance, yes. Young Swinscow confessed. But not to the theft. He said he'd earned the money working as a prostitute.
Oh, okay.
At a male brothel, located at 19 Cleveland Street, run by a man named Charles Hammond.
A male brothel.
Yeah.
Operating right there in Victorian London. That must have been part of a hidden world most people couldn't even imagine.
Well, it existed. And Swinscow wasn't done. He said he'd been introduced to Hammond by an 18-year-old general post office clerk, a Henry Newlove.
So connections within the post office itself.
Yes, and he named two other telegraph boys involved too, George Alma Wright and Charles Ernest Thickbroom, both about 17. It was like a network operating within the communication system of Brothels.
So this minor theft just cracks open this whole clandestine operation. Did the police just take the boy's word for it?
Constable Hanks was smart. He sought corroboration. He got statements from Wright and Thickbroom, which backed up Swinskow's story.
Okay.
And then he secured a confession from Henry Newlove himself.
So he had multiple confirmations.
Exactly. So Hanks escalated it to his superiors, and the investigation landed on the desk of Detective Inspector Frederick Aberline.
Aberline. That name sounds familiar. Wasn't he involved in the Ripper case?
The very same.
Yeah.
No stranger to London's darker corners, though this was a very different kind of scandal he was walking into.
Right. Aberline, of all things, must have moved pretty quickly.
You'd think so. Aberline got a warrant to arrest Hammond and Newlove. This was under Section 11 of the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1885.
What was significant about that act?
It was huge. It essentially criminalized all homosexual acts between men, not just sodomy. It broadened the scope for prosecution massively in cases like this one.
I see. So Aberline heads to Cleveland Street.
On July 6, yes. But the house was locked up tight. Hammond had vanished.
Already gone.
Yep. Aberline did manage to track down and arrest Newlove, though, at his mother's place.
So Hammond got a warning. How did that happen?
It turned out that Newlove, in the time between his own confession to Hanks and Aberline showing up to arrest him, had gone straight to Cleveland Street.
And tipped Hammond off.
Exactly. Gave him the heads up. Hammond fled, first to his brothers, then ultimately out of the country altogether.
Wow. A crucial escape right at the beginning. Must have complicated things.
Hugely. It meant the central figure, the organizer, was gone.
So Newlove's in custody. Does he start talking about the clients? This is where the aristocratic names start to surface, isn't it?
That's precisely it. On the way to the police station, apparently, Newlove started naming names. Patrons of 19 Cleveland Street.
Like who?
He implicated Lord Arthur Somerset.
Lord Arthur Somerset. Wasn't he connected to the royals?
Very connected. An equerry, basically a personal attendant to the Prince of Wales.
Wow. Okay, that's serious. Anyone else?
He also named Henry Fitzroy, the Earl of Euston, and even mentioned a British Army colonel, Colonel Gervois.
So suddenly this isn't just about a local vice den. This is potentially a national scandal reaching the highest levels of society.
Instantly. The gravity just shifted enormously. An equerry to the Prince of Wales? I mean, you can't get much closer to the inner circle.
This small theft had just detonated. What happened to these men, Somerset and Euston?
Well, Lord Arthur Somerset was interviewed by the police, but there was a noticeable delay in taking further action against him.
Treading carefully.
It certainly seemed that way. Handling prominent figures was clearly a delicate matter, and ultimately, before any formal charges could actually be brought,
Let me guess, he vanished too.
he fled abroad, just left the country.
Just like that. No attempt to stop him.
It highlights a crucial point about Victorian society, doesn't it? Social standing offered a shield. The ability to just pack up and leave wasn't an option for the telegraph boys, for instance.
No kidding. That really smells like trying to keep a lid on things, avoid a bigger scandal. What about the Earl of Euston?
Euston's story isn't over yet. He'll come back into focus later in quite a dramatic way. The Colonel, Gervois, his name kind of fades from the main narrative.
Okay. But another figure popped up around then, didn't he? Someone called Vec.
George Vec, yes. He presented himself as a clergyman, interestingly,
A clergyman.
but he'd actually worked at the telegraph office before and had been sacked for improper conduct with messenger boys.
Ah, so there's a prior connection right there within the telegraph office itself.
Exactly. It suggests this wasn't entirely isolated, maybe part of a wider network or pattern of behavior.
He sounds like a potentially key link between the boys and maybe the clients.
He certainly seemed to be. An investigation into Vec uncovered letters from another man, Algernon Allies.
And who was he?
When the police questioned Allies, he admitted getting money from Lord Arthur Somerset. He also admitted to having a sexual relationship with Somerset and to working at the Cleveland Street house for Hammond,
So the net was definitely widening. More names, more connections being confirmed.
solidifying the picture of this clandestine operation, yes. Pulling in more people, both participants and, well, facilitators.
And then comes the rumor. The one that sent absolute shockwaves, even though it was never actually proven, Prince Albert Victor.
Ah, yes. This is where the story gets truly sensational. Whispers started, especially overseas, in foreign newspapers.
Not so much in Britain.
The British press was very careful, but the rumor was that Prince Albert Queen Victoria's grandson, second in line to the throne, had actually visited 19 Cleveland Street.
Wow. The future king of England. Supposedly linked to a male brothel. That's dynamite. That could destabilize the monarchy itself.
Absolutely unprecedented crisis territory. And while, as you say, never substantiated, and the British papers didn't name him, the existence of the rumor itself is incredibly powerful.
How so?
It's widely believed it massively influenced how the authorities handled the whole thing, fueled this intense desire to contain the scandal, to stop it from exploding further.
So the fear of royal involvement shaped the official response.
Almost certainly. And that rumor has persisted, you know. It still hollers how some biographers view Prince Albert Victor, even without concrete proof.
It's incredible, the power of an unproven rumor. There's that weird anecdote, too, isn't there? About Somerset supposedly bringing the prince there.
Oh, the bull furniture story. Yes, totally unsubstantiated, but fascinating. The idea was Somerset might have deliberately brought the prince to the house.
Under the guise of looking at fancy furniture. Bull furniture was very high-end, very aristocratic taste, right?
Exactly. Expensive, intricate stuff. A plausible excuse, perhaps. And the alleged thinking was that the prince's mere presence, even for 5 minutes, might act as some kind of deterrent.
Like, the future king was here. You can't possibly investigate this place.
Sort of. That seems to be the gist of the anecdote, that his brief visit could be used as a shield.
It's a wild story. Shows the kind of thinking, maybe the desperation involved.
Or the perceived power they thought they wielded. It speaks volumes about the hierarchy, doesn't it? Whether it happened or not, the idea is extraordinary.
So with all these incredibly high-profile names swirling Somerset, Euston, even the prince rumor, the legal proceedings that followed must have been under intense scrutiny.
You'd expect so. But the outcomes, well, they seemed surprisingly lenient to many people at the time.
Lenient how?
When Newlev and Vec, the post office clerk and the ex-fake clergyman, were finally tried, they got 4 months and 9 months of hard labor, respectively.
Which sounds harsh, but maybe wasn't for the time.
It was widely seen as pretty light, actually, especially given the potential scale of things. It immediately sparked questions, whispers about a cover-up. Were they trying to minimize the scandal to protect others?
Higher up the food chain.
Precisely.
And Hammond, the guy running the place, he's evaporated.
He'd successfully fled abroad, remember? And despite the British authorities apparently knowing where he was,
They didn't try to bring him back.
no serious attempt at extradition was made. There were reports he even got financial help to escape. And the case against him was just quietly dropped.
Dropped. On whose advice?
Allegedly, on the advice of the Prime Minister himself, Lord Salisbury.
The Prime Minister potentially involved in shutting down the investigation. Okay, that definitely fuels the cover-up theories. Yeah.
It certainly does. It looked very suspicious from the outside. High-level intervention, seemingly.
And the suspicion didn't stop there, did it? What happened when the Earl of Euston was named in the press?
Right, so Euston gets named publicly by a journalist, Ernest Park. Euston's reaction. He immediately sued Park for libel.
Okay, defending his name. Did he win?
He did win, despite the fact that during the trial, a male prostitute named John Saul testified in court.
Testified about what?
Saul detailed alleged encounters he'd had with Euston at 19 Cleveland Street.
So there was testimony directly implicating Euston, but he still won the libel case?
He did. It caused outrage. The judge in that specific case was later described pretty damningly by a former Solicitor General as having no notion whatever of what justice meant.
Wow. And what happened to the journalist, Park, the one who named Euston?
He paid a heavy price for it, convicted of libel, sentenced to 12 months in prison, a pretty severe sentence.
So the aristocrat walks free despite testimony, and the journalist who reported it goes to jail.
It starkly illustrates the power dynamics, doesn't it? The power of the aristocracy and the real dangers involved in challenging their reputations back then.
The scales of justice seem incredibly tilted there. What about the solicitor, Arthur Newton? He represented New Love in Somerset. Didn't he get into trouble too?
Yes, Newton faced the music as well. He was charged with obstruction of justice.
For what specifically?
For helping Hammond and some of the boys flee the country, basically helping key figures escape prosecution.
Did he fight the charges?
He eventually pleaded guilty to one charge. He received a prison sentence, 6 weeks, I think, which many in the legal profession at the time actually thought was unduly harsh.
Harsher than New Love and Vec got.
Relatively speaking, yes. Especially when compared to the leniency shown elsewhere. It seemed the system was perhaps more keen on punishing those who expose things or help people escape than getting to the bottom of it all.
Or holding the powerful clients accountable.
That was certainly the perception, and it's a big reason why Cleveland Street remains such a fascinating and controversial case.
And there was political fallout too, right? A member of Parliament got involved.
Henry Labouchere, yes. A very outspoken MP. Interestingly, he was personally strongly against homosexuality, but he became a fierce critic of how the government handled the scandal.
What was his argument?
He flat out accused them of a deliberate cover-up, protecting aristocratic patrons, shielding their allies. He pointed the finger directly at Prime Minister Lord Salisbury, implicating him in obstructing justice.
Strong accusations. Did he try to force an investigation?
He did. Labouchere actually proposed a motion in Parliament to launch a formal investigation into these cover-up allegations.
And what happened?
There was a big debate, apparently quite heated, but in the end, his motion was defeated.
So Parliament basically shut down any further official look into the government's actions.
Effectively, yes. That defeat pretty much closed the door on any more official scrutiny of how the Cleveland Street affair was handled at the top.
This whole story is just such a tangled web, isn't it? Secrets, power plays, the whispers of royal involvement, these dramatic escapes across borders. It's just a stark contrast between that stiff upper lip, public morality, and the hidden reality.
Absolutely. It really lays bare the intricate and often deeply hypocritical social fabric of the Victorian era. Appearances were everything.
And the truth could be conveniently buried under layers of privilege.
Seems that way.
If you're finding this deep dive into the Cleveland Street scandal as captivating as we are, and how could you not be, make sure you hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, don't miss out on more fascinating stories from Tell Me More. We've got plenty more historical adventures lined up for you to explore.
Definitely. So, okay, let's talk about the lasting impact. How did this scandal affect Victorian society more broadly?
Well, it significantly reinforced an existing idea, or perhaps prejudice, that male homosexuality was primarily an aristocratic vice.
An upper-class problem.
Sort of, yeah. And one that corrupted young men from the lower classes. The telegraph boys were often painted in the press as victims, led astray by the immoral desires of the wealthy elite.
which just entrenched those societal prejudices further.
Exactly. And these attitudes, they didn't just disappear when the headlines faded. They lingered.
How so? Did it connect to later events?
Very much so. These perceptions were still very potent a few years later during Oscar Wilde's trial.
Ah, right.
Reviews of Wilde's novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, even made indirect references to Cleveland Street. One critic infamously dismissed the book as suitable for none but outlawed noblemen and perverted telegraph boys.
Wow, that's blunt, directly linking it.
And get this, the lawyer prosecuting Oscar Wilde, he had actually defended one of the men implicated back in the Cleveland Street scandal.
No way. The connections are incredible.
It really shows how that scandal continued to cast this long shadow over any discussion of sexuality and morality in Britain for years.
It really does. A symptom of deeper anxieties. What about Lord Arthur Somerset? The equerry who fled. Did he ever come back? Did he ever face justice?
The warrant for his arrest technically remained active, but no, he never returned to England.
So he just lived abroad.
Lived in self-imposed exile, apparently under an assumed name, for over 30 years, until he died in 1926.
So essentially a life lived looking over his shoulder.
A permanent consequence stemming from this one scandal. Pretty extraordinary.
And the house itself.
Yeah.
19 Cleveland Street, the heart of the whole thing. What happened to the building?
It was right there in central London, actually opposite the Middlesex Hospital at the time.
Still there.
No. Interestingly, the house itself was demolished in the 1890s to make way for an extension to the hospital. So, despite some theories you might hear about it being renumbered or something,
The original building is gone.
gone. Physically erased, you could say. A scandalous chapter paved over, quite literally.
So no blue plaque hunting for that particular spot today then.
Afraid not. The location is now just part of the hospital grounds. History buried under progress, I suppose.
Okay, so as we wrap this up, what are the main takeaways? What does Cleveland Street really tell us about that era?
I think it offers this compelling, if disturbing, glimpse into Victorian complexity. It just rips the cover off the hypocrisy that existed beneath those rigid moral codes.
And reveals the hidden lives people were leading.
Absolutely. And it vividly shows the severe legal and social penalties for same-sex acts and the extraordinary lengths people, even the government, might go to protect reputations, to preserve the status quo.
Yeah, the preservation of the social order seems key. And those persistent rumors about Prince Albert Victor, even without proof, they really underline that intense public fascination, didn't they? Especially when scandal touched the aristocracy.
Definitely. The public was clearly captivated. And the different ways the press and the authorities handled those rumors, that tells its own story.
About power.
About power, about privilege, and about that deep-seated Victorian fear of public exposure.
So a final thought maybe for listeners to ponder.
Right.
How might this scandal have actually, subtly perhaps, influenced the conversation around sexuality in Britain moving forward?
That's a great question. Did it reinforce negative stereotypes? Or did the sheer scale of the cover-up maybe spark some kind of counter-reaction eventually? What were the long-term effects on how homosexuality was perceived and treated?
It's just this complex web, isn't it? Secrets, power, social attitudes.
And it continues to intrigue us. It's a potent reminder that history isn't always straightforward, is it?
Not at all.
Often the most revealing stories are the ones hidden in the shadows, buried in those carefully guarded secrets of the past.